Hi everyone, my name's Jack and I'll be running our Q&A today. We'll be predominantly focusing on Avantis and dLive questions. So if you have any dLive questions or indeed any Avantis questions, please pop them in the chat and I will do my best to answer them. I hope everyone's having a lovely time today. It's beginning to get a little bit warmer here in the UK, which is just excellent. I hope everyone's been out doing some shows, getting to mix lots of really interesting things on all their consoles. And if you have had any interesting projects or managed to go out and do any interesting shows, please pop those in the chat too, as we always love to hear from everybody about what they've got going on. Since the last time we spoke, we have had an Avantis firmware release, which introduced Shure RF integration to Avantis. So I think at some point we'll have a quick look at that, how it works, what it is, how you can set it up. Yeah, but any questions about dLive or Avantis, put them in the chat. Otherwise, this will be a very, very boring stream. Yes. All right. Well, let's have a quick look, as I mentioned, about Shure integration whilst we wait for some people to come up with anything they'd like to ask me. So what is it? Well, let me share my screen. That would be better, wouldn't it? Let's share Avantis Director. So here is Avantis Director running on Windows at the moment with a template show loaded. So not too much going on, not very many interesting things happening on my screen. But if we go to, for instance, Setup and Config, as you can see, I checked that it was working earlier before I came in, but let's pretend I wasn't in the right tab. We would go up here and we go to Config, we go to RF devices. If you haven't used it before, there'll be a button here that says Enable Detection. And what that does is it allows the Avantis to go out onto the network and scan for any Shure devices that you might want to assign to your channels. I've got some messages coming in now. Buenos dias I'm not sure how to say your name, I'm afraid. But Mr. Gamanal, William J. Burr, oh, he's tagged somebody. Nice. And I think someone's saying hi from Peru. So hello, Peru from the UK. Oh, and good afternoon from Kent. Hello, Kent. Cool. So what we can see here on my screen is a few. We have a 4-channel ULXD Dante microphone receiver, and we have the 4 channels here. I'm just going to try and check which one I have my microphone connected to. I think it's number 1. Have a little. Oh, it looks like I've got it connected to 1 and 4. So one of the inputs here we would have to assign to our RF device. So let's pretend that we had our handheld set up on channel 1, for instance. I would choose the socket that it was assigned to. Now, I don't have these plumbed into my Avantis, but usually in one of these situations, you'd either use an XLR cable with plain old analog audio and connect that to maybe your GX4816 or your expander, or you might use Dante to get it into the Avantis. Well, in this example, I'm going to pretend I've got it plugged into input 1 on my GX4816, which I've got connected to my S-Link port. I don't, but let's pretend that I do. I'm going to hit apply. Now, any channels that are assigned to that socket should now, if I go in here and I go S-Link, and number 1, there's an X because there's nothing connected, but what it should do in just a moment is associate my RF device with this channel. So you can see now in my bank view, I've got RF level, I've got my battery level. And if I go ahead and talk into this microphone and click on it, you can now see this new little area has appeared with the RF level, the AF level as reported from the Shure device. So the reason there's a disconnect here is because it's not actually plugged in. What we're seeing is we're seeing the level as Shure reports it. This is really useful if you're using analog audio. You can see how much sort of gain you've got and how far away you are of what it's doing on the microphone. So let's pretend that you've just taken a rack of microphones, or you're at a corporate event and you've set all your microphones to have a very, very high gain. And then somebody springs a band on you, or a singer or something like that. They might take a microphone that's gained for being held by people that don't, know how to use microphones. And then suddenly someone's singing into it properly like this, you'll very quickly A, hear it, and B, be able to have a look at your RF device and identify, yes, there's an awful lot of gain on that microphone, and behave accordingly. If I click on the RF info, I get like a little pop-up with a bit more sort of extra information. So I can see the device and device name. So in this case, it's my ULXD with its default channel name. You can press locate, which makes the actual box flash, which is kind of cool. And you get the information such as the frequency. You can adjust the gain. Just be aware that this gain here is it's the receiver gain. So you're not affecting the gain on the microphone itself. Unfortunately, you will have to go in and do that manually. But there is an additional sort of digital trim that Shure offers on some of its devices. And it's that digital trim that you're adjusting here. This can be useful, though, if you're plumbed into a device that maybe doesn't have a pad on it, or if someone's left the transmitter gain, in mic level because they're expecting to be plugged into a console that doesn't have a trim, or it doesn't have a pad. Sorry, you can go in there and adjust that directly from the console without needing to go down to the receivers, without needing to pull out any additional software. And what we tend to say is that this shouldn't really replace an RF tech on a large show, but on smaller single op shows, it means you can see stuff right there on the screen. You don't have to go scrabbling around in laptops. It might be one less laptop that you need at front of house, or maybe one less screen that you need all the time, because it's something you can then move on to a different screen, so you don't have to have it up and in front of you the whole time. But it's also really useful on larger shows if you do have a proper RF tech, that it means that you, particularly at front of house, when you're quite far away from what's going on stage, if you hear something strange, if you hear a click or a pop, or a bang, you can very quickly see, the RF, is coming and going on that channel. I'm sure the team on stage have got it, and they're going to work out why that is. Or you might look at your channel and see, oh, everything looks absolutely fine. Maybe this is a placement issue, or maybe somebody's just smacking the microphone against a wall, because we all know that people do strange things with microphones, particularly at conferences. Let's see. I've got some more messages that have come in since I started talking about that. Something about Keith Johnson being on a screen too much. I'm not going to read too far into that. And I've got a question here that says, is there any way to truly reset a channel, input name and color included? Sort of. So what we do is we split our resets up, because most of the time people don't truly want to reset everything, and they'll want to reset a certain component. So if you do want to reset a channel completely, back to zero, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. So the first thing you're going to need to do is reset the processing. So you'll press reset, and you'll press this button down here, and that resets all of the input processing. What we don't do by default on input processing resets is change the gain or change things like phantom and pad presets. The reason we choose not to do that is if you're using a digital split system, then that will affect the other person. That will affect whoever the other engineer is that's getting that split. And you might not really want to send a massive phantom power bang through the PA. Well, I mean, that's the main reason, really. So what we do is we have a separate reset for the preamp. So when you press reset, you can still reset the preamp back to its default, which is 27 dB, no phantom, and with the pad off. And you do that just by pressing reset preamp at the top. And the final reset you were talking about was name and color. That's in a slightly different place again. So if you go, I'm gonna get this wrong now. It's in config, mixer config, name and color. There we go. And you can do resets from here. So the resets here you can do by range. So if you want to reset a lot of channels at once, you can go in and reset them all. For instance, when I'm working on festival shows, I like our default color scheme. I really like the idea that green is an input. So when people set up shows and they go and change all the colors, it really throws me. Now, normally you go back to your own scene or go, reload your own show file. But if there's some reason I have to work on someone else's show file, and I'm going to be mixing it, I will go in here and I'll grab input and I'll put that all the way to the end and reset them all to green, and so on. it can also be handy if you want to reset all your names and things like that really quickly. So there's 3 different places you have to do the reset. We've done that really, really deliberately because there are very, very few occasions where you actually want to do all of that at the same time. And there are lots of occasions where doing that accidentally when you don't mean to would be really bad for the show. So those are the 3 places if you want to go ahead and do a reset on Avantis. Somebody says, is there any way to reduce the number of stereo auxes and to select which auxes go and which ones stay? So not at the moment. At the moment, it's when you reduce the number of buses, it starts from the last bus and it works down. It's something that's on the feature request list that we might do in the future. But at the moment, that's the way mixed bus reconfigurations work on, certainly on Avantis and dLive. I'm fairly sure it's the same across our product range. But I don't like to talk for my colleagues unless I'm really sure, and I'm not. Any plans for similar control with Sennheiser RF systems? Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at all RF, manufacturers, and deciding what needs to go and what products when and things like that. Obviously, these things take time. There's a lot of work involved, but it is very much something that we consider regularly with almost every release. Anything re-ambisonics decoding in the works? Not at the moment. That's really interesting. Is there a way to reset the sockets too, though, without going to the I/O patch? No, at the moment, if you want to change the socket, you do need to go through and do it in the I/O patch. We don't really have any plans to introduce socket resets, just because, generally speaking, it's not something you'd want to do via a reset. But more than that, the I/O patching that we do in the template show file is just a suggestion. Like everything else, there kind of is a there is like a baseline to go back to. In terms of I/O patching, that's just what we think is useful for a template show. That's not sort of correct or the default, if that makes sense. It's just what we reckon. So you would obviously be able to patch that back however you wished. Cool. If I got to the end of the questions so far. I'm ready for the update with RTA in each channel GQ. You might need to explain to me a little bit what you mean there, because most of our input channels, all of our input channels currently just have PQs. There's no sort of GQ on input channel. I suppose you could mean output. There is something of an RTA on outputs. I don't know how easy this is going to be for me to demo, but let's have a little look. So if we go into our RTA, let me get a SIGGEN going. Make sure I don't think that output's routed anywhere, but just in case it's going to make an awful lot of noise. Let's go for main. And we're sending out 0 dB at 440. Yeah, that's fine. So if we then go back into our GQ, and I'm going to paffle this input, you can now see that there is an RTA just above the GQ. So this is really useful. If you've been doing a long festival and your ears are really tired, and someone's making you ring out some monitors, and you can't hear anything anymore. I use this all the time when I'm out doing shows. There's something to be said for being able to, just get frequencies from memory. But for the rest of us that aren't superhuman, RTAs are great. Oh, Linton says I missed your question. I will scroll up and have a look. That hasn't come through. The first message I can see from Linton is the one with you saying you think I've missed your question. So if you can post it again, I'll do my best to answer that for you. I think, unless I'm being very silly. Just says, are there any plans for 36 fader Avantis with a third screen? No plans at the moment. We're always keeping an eye on, what's out and about. One of the things we have to do internally at ANH is think about if we did come out with it, how much would it cost? And some of these projects, by the time we've worked out how much things cost, they don't really make much sense, because by the time you're spending that much money, really you'd be better buying something else. So some of these things sound like a really good idea. I really like the idea of having a really, really big Avantis. I think it's really cool. But I don't know that I've had any conversations specifically about that, but quite often yeah, quite often that's the issue, is actually by the time you've worked out how much something that would cost and weigh, you know, it just doesn't become a very appealing option, shall we say. Can you just make me one? Yeah, I think it would probably be about $500,000. We can transfer that to my personal bank. No, of course not. I'm afraid not, buddy. But it's, you know, we do keep an eye on these things. We do look at what's available, what sort of shows people are doing, what things are selling well, what, you know, products are responding really well, and stuff like that. And we try our best to keep an eye on the different options. Nico's just said a smiley face. It's very kind. Yeah. So that's we've had a quick look at RF devices. That's sort of the only new addition we've had recently that I can think of off the top of my head. That's worth having a little talk about. But if anyone's got any other questions, they're more than welcome to put them in the chat, and I will do my best to answer them. Yeah. Otherwise, you know, I always try and stay on these for a little bit of time, but we don't tend to hang around too long if there's not much conversation going on, as it's very boring just to watch me talking at a screen. Yes. So what else is going on? You know, obviously we've got Avantis 1.2 should be coming out in the not too distant future. We're not quite ready to start talking about ETAs and talking about feature sets, but that's sort of our next. That's going to be our next big thing from the team that I work in. Is we're getting all geared up to start looking at new Avantis firmware releases. So if there's anything you've been, you know, really keen to get into, you know, any features, now is a great time to tell us about all the features you're excited for. And then, of course, after we get past Avantis 1.2, we'll start having a think about what's next in dLive land, which should be really exciting. We've got lots of really cool ideas. We've had lots of good conversations with people about what we've got lots of really cool ideas about what we might do and what features we might put in. But if you have any sort of requests or things that, you know, you think would really make it a better product for whatever it is you do with it, whatever kind of mixing it is you get up to, now is very much the time to have that conversation with us. So I've got a few questions that have come in. Does the Avantis do 5.1? Avantis does not do 5.1 at the moment. Any plans for a smaller Avantis? I refer you back to the question about the bigger Avantis. Is that we're always keeping an eye on, you know, what's available, what people want, and what, you know, what problems it might solve. There's no point with us coming out with another console just for the sake of coming out with another console. You know, there has to be a really good reason about, you know, why we're going to bring it out, how much it's going to cost, who's going to use it, and what it's going to be useful for. So, you know, if you think I could really do with a bigger or a smaller anything, you know, let us know. Let us know what it is you think that would do that no other console would do, and it is something we'll have a discussion about. There's a few more questions coming in now. Aaron just says that he loves some of our analog stuff. The GL2800 has moved up to an ML5000. Both really exciting consoles. There is a venue near us that has a ML5000, and I always enjoy seeing it put through its paces. Ross says, "Go have an undo button." Absolutely, that's the sort of thing we can have a discussion about. The problem with undo buttons is deciding how far back you go. Is, you know, if you've done something and a few seconds later you've moved a fader and you've moved something else and you've, you know, changed the compressor value, what do you undo? How much do you need us to undo? And how much does the console need to remember? But it's an interesting feature request for sure. Richie says, show how to enable LCR plus routing for an input channel. That is a question. Let's have a go. So the first we need to do is put our console into LCR plus mode. So we're going to do that by going to setup. We're going to go to control. Oh, we're not. We're going to go to mixer config, and we're going to change our main bus to LCR plus. Once we're in LCR plus, and that will take just a minute to get reconfigured, you might see some flashing going on behind me as the Avantis changes its configuration. Oh, lots of questions have come in. You then need to make sure that each channel is routed correctly in LCR+. So if we take, for instance, channel 2, and I'm going to press my routing button, then you have this new LCR plus mode at the top, and we can put our main into LR, LCR, or LCR plus. What LCR plus does is you have your normal panning with left and right, but if you have something that's not panned at all, it's dead down the middle, you might want to have a bit of bleed into your speakers, into your left and right speakers. And you can do that by adjusting the divergence control here. And what it does is it allows you to bleed some of your center send to your L and R. Oh, the chat has gone. I'm not showing my screen. Oh, thank you, Richie. There we go. So we've changed the mix bus configuration. We've gone into routing, and in routing, we have our bus config here. So you can, from the drop down, choose whether you want it to be just left and right, LCR or LCR plus. And in LCR plus, we have our send. Oh, why is our send not working? It's interesting. We have our send of our left and right, and our divergence to control whether we're going to the left, the right, and how much bleed we're going to have from our center into our left and right. Let me scroll up a little bit and see if I can catch up on some of these questions. Any plans for individual socket labeling in Avantis and dLive? None at the moment, but we've had loads of requests for it. So it's definitely something that we've got our engineers having a look at, but we don't have any specific plans at the moment. Why do you have console for Paraguay? Very sad. There are consoles coming in all the time, all over the world. Unfortunately, as will be a surprise to absolutely nobody. There is an international shipping crisis at the moment, which means that it can be really difficult for us to get products into different countries, or sometimes the shipping time into specific territories can be really, really long. It's why if you see on Facebook, often people will message going, oh, people who've had their Avantis delivered recently, when did you order? I always try and make a really, really big point of saying, don't compare different territories, because stuff can take an awful long time to get shipped. We have all sorts of issues getting containers on and off boats. But we are trying our best. We're working with lots of different shipping partners all over the world. I know from a meeting we had the other day that our sales team have been coming up with sort of new routes, new companies to ship things through, and also making sure that our contracts are a little bit stronger to make it a little bit more difficult for shipping companies to just not ship things. So it's something we're trying really hard. We're trying really, really, really hard to get products into all sorts of different places. There is nowhere that we're just not sending stuff to. Yeah, it's the sort of thing we need to liaise with your local distributor, local dealer network, and find out what the options are for getting consoles. Next question is from Martin Butterson. Says, is it the same preamps in the dLive mix racks in the DX168, GX16, 4816 boxes? Does the gain setting change if I repatch an input from a mix rack preamp to a DX box, or vice versa? It's a really interesting question. So fundamentally, the preamp design is the same. There are some differences because we're having to put it into a different box, have different power supply requirements, things like that. Stuff that's as simple as, on a GX4816, the cards are 10 inputs, not 8. So there's, at what point is a different preamp a different preamp? But fundamentally, I cannot hear the difference. They are incredibly similar. Does the preamp value change if I repatch an input from a mix rack preamp to a DX box? It shouldn't do. If you have something that is hitting 0 dBu with, let's say, 10 dB of gain on a GX, and you unplug it and plug it into a DX168, it should need the same amount of gain to hit the same point. Let's see. Oh gosh, there's lots of messages that have come in since then. Let's see if we can skip ahead a little bit. Lots of people saying how much they like our consoles, which is absolutely fantastic. Frieza says, do you know when the Wave SoundGrid driver will be compatible for M1 Max? We don't. We do, work with Waves and Dante in particular for all sorts of things, but it tends to be more the console to their network side of things that we get really involved in, as opposed to the SoundGrid to M1, for instance. Lots and lots and lots of different ones of our partners have had to deal with getting ready for M1 Max. I have seen some stuff on their website saying that it's something they're working on, but we don't have any inside knowledge. Certainly don't have any inside knowledge I'm allowed to leak on Wave's behalf at the moment, but I do know it's something they're working on. Let's see. Infinity far back for stupid people like myself. I assume that that's an updated answer to the undo button request. For sure. I mean, it's the sort of thing that we can talk about. It's the sort of thing we can, investigate for a future release. I'm absolutely sure. What option soft key can cue a mix bus and send to fader at the same time? I believe. I'm assuming. Oh, on a dLive. Okay, let's get dLive Director up, and I'll remember to share my screen this time. Oh, my camera's gone. The absolute joys of live streaming. Let's get that running again. Just a moment. Meanwhile, I'll also get Director up and running for dLive. Director 193. So I should momentarily have my camera back. There we go. The joys of live streaming. And we have Director loading up in the background. And we'll get that connected and we'll have a little look about soft keys and sends on faders. I mean, the answer is we have like a all-in-one soft key option, which is from memory. It's Cell Mix Paffle Scene, and you can choose out of that list what it is you want. What it is you want to trigger. So we see a lot of people who use this particular monitors where you want to have a button you press on a soft key and you can hear what you can hear what their mix is, your faders move. For that configuration, you would not want to also trigger a scene, but the option's there if that's something you want to do as well when you press that soft key. So I am just connecting to my dLive mix rack just off screen, and I'll pull that up in a minute. Just having a look at some of the other messages that are coming through. William says, just want to say my favorite feature of the Avantis is how each page is completely customizable. You can add channels in whatever slot, yet group them together on a page. Yeah, I mean, obviously I think it's fantastic because I'm massively biased. But one of the nice things is if you want to work in an analog fashion and have your inputs and then your buses and then whatever, you absolutely can. So I know a lot of people who prefer to have like an old style master section in the middle of the console, particularly if you're on like a larger dLive. I know quite a few people will have all of their inputs on the left bank, and then in the center section they'll have sort of their effects returns, but also their mains, their matrices, and things like that. And then on the right hand side they'll have more inputs emulating the layout of like an old school large format analog desk. And you can, if you want to work that way. If you want to have your drums followed by your drum verbs followed by your drum aux, you could do that. There are lots of different ways, which is fantastic. Joanne says, how do you do bus compression for drums? In these sessions, we don't tend to go into specifically how do you mix things, just because there are so many different ways, and there's so much content out there, on other platforms, that it would be a bit silly for us to sort of come in and tell you how to use the product in that way. Mostly because I'm 100% sure if I came on here and said, oh, this is how to mix drums, everyone would tell me that I was very wrong and that no one should mix drums that way. However, if you want to send us a message to support@alan-heath.com and open up a ticket with our support team, I'd be happy to send you some content that might help with that, with sort of options, but also tailored to the options available on our consoles. Let's see. So we've got some more stuff on master outputs. Undo button would be fantastic. Justin very kindly says, thank you so much to everyone at A&H for all the awesome updates and training and just great products. That's very kind. Obviously, it's a massive team effort. Me and my colleague Keith and a couple of my other colleagues sort of get to come and talk to everybody, which we really love. But there is a whole heap of people behind us, making sure that the products are as good as they can possibly be, and doing all sorts of different things. So it's very, very, very kind. Frieza says, can you change the physical output of the headphones out to a matrix out, sewing in all talkbacks aux with the baffle? Be great to use the built-in headphone amp in the console. So you can't at the moment. That's a really interesting request. I'm just trying to think if there's anything you could do that would be sort of equivalent, if you like. My dLive has now connected and turned on, so I will share that with you momentarily, and I'll talk about that real quick, and then we'll go back to the original question. So here is dLive. I've got some sort of error on my Surface. I'm sure that's fine. Let's have a look. What was the question? The question was, what can you do summing and all talkbacks, auxes, etc. So one of the things you can do, if we go down to Surface, and we go to audio and we go to our baffle settings, is you can assign an external input to baffle source. So if we go into here, for instance, we've got lots and lots of different options, but one of the things we can push into our baffle is, for instance, an aux. So there we go. Is we can have an aux. So what you can do then is mix anything else that you want to go into your baffle send, such as talkbacks, into that aux, and then inject that into your baffle bus. So it's not quite what you asked for. It's kind of the other way around. But you can definitely put all of your talkbacks into the baffle bus, and then use the baffle bus as normal. So hopefully that helps. Let's see. Our tech team at the New Life Church use Alan Heath consoles on our campuses. Okay, so Ethan says he's working with a church that have lots and lots and lots of different consoles, SQs, QUs, iLives. Is there a massive difference in the Avantis series? So there's kind of a step change in A&H consoles. You've kind of got everything that came after we moved to XCVI. So XCVI is the mixing technology that's in our consoles. So it's something we use in dLive, it's something we use in Avantis, and it's something we use in SQ. And this is the name we give to the collection of technologies that do all the audio processing. And that's sort of the easiest way to explain what it is in as few words as possible. So you've kind of got everything that came before, which was DSP based, maybe had a little higher latency, an XCVI, which is FPGA based, includes all of the things like our new deep plugins, which are all the compressor emulations and things like that. So there is a massive step difference between things that are pre-XCVI, so that would be things like the iLive and QU, and things that are post-XCVI. So this would be things like Avantis, dLive, and SQ. I think that's the best way to explain it. It's a completely different processing technology. It's something we've written from the ground up. It's got fantastically low latency. We've got complete control over things like phase coherency between buses and inputs to buses and things like that. And it's not one particular thing that makes it sound fantastic, but it's the collection of all those different technologies that we've packaged up, that mean there's quite a step change between, for instance, the QU and the SQ. So one of the questions we were asked a little bit earlier was about soft keys and about how we can use that to do multiple functions at once. So if I go into my Surface settings, and I'm going to go into Control, and I'm going to go into soft keys, I can, for instance, use soft key 1, and in my drop down, the configuration the soft key I was talking about a little bit earlier that lets you do multiple things at once is this cell mix baffle scene. Really useful for monitor engineers who want to press one button, have the settings for the bus that they're working on come up in front of them, but also hear it at the same time, and have the, oh god, I keep turning my screen on and it keeps turning itself off again. Let's try that again. There we go. So what we do to get those, we go Surface, Control, and soft keys, and then we have our soft keys on the right hand side that we can set to be different things. And the configuration that we're talking about is to go soft key 1 from the drop down, and the drop down that we need is cell mix baffle scene. So that's this one here, cell mix baffle scene, that has lots of different options in it that we can set to do all at the same time. So for instance, in our configuration where we're talking about having a monitor engineer do something, we're going to choose our drop down, our channel type is going to be a bus. Let's pretend we're doing in-ears here, and we're going to go for our stereo aux. Or indeed mono if I haven't got any set up in the bus configuration. We can set which paffle we're going to. So if you're running with multiple paffles, maybe you've got a stage tech that's got an iPad and they're using their own ears and doing their own thing to check on channels. We wouldn't want to use their paffle. We want to use the paffle that's associated with our surface. So by default, that's paffle 1. But if you were, for instance, working in a multi-surface setup, where you've got 2 or more surfaces sharing a mix rack, you'd want to make sure the paffle number matched the setting on the surface. And I'll show you in a minute how to check what that is. We've got the type here, so you can choose whether you want it just to be a couple of different things, whether you want it to be mix and paffle or cell, etc. And you can also choose whether you want it to recall a scene at the same time or not. So for our setup, where we're talking about a monitor engineer, we don't want it to recall a scene. We just want it to set the mix, select the bus, and set up what you're hearing for your baffle bus. If, for instance, you didn't want it to select that bus, say you were working on a lead vocal, and you want it to be able to flick through all your different buses and hear how it is in each of those buses, but you still wanted to maybe cue it while you were doing that, you would set this up so it was just, for instance, mix and paffle, so you weren't changing what was selected. Press apply, and when you press that soft key, if I bring up my buses here, so this is currently in the main mix. We know it's the main mix because it says main in the top right, and we can throw a couple of things into that main mix. When I hit this soft key, my bus has changed, and I now have sends on faders to that bus. So we don't need to, for instance, I've got a 1500 here. So we've just got our 12 faders. You don't have loads of faders to have all your bus masters up at the same time. This can be really useful because it means you're not, constantly going back page to page to page. You can use the soft keys, hit your bus, and mix to that bus. So hopefully that answers the question. There were a few more that came in whilst I was showing that. Let's see what we've got. On Avantis, is it possible to get a consistent experience if we choose to put selected channel compressor threshold attack release pots next to the screen? Being able to control the attack and release of these pots if we have a comp model selected that switches ISO pots for attack and release. So I'll show you what you can do if I think I've understood your question correctly. So I will change back to my Avantis. Let's get Avantis up. Avantis Director. I'm going to turn it off and then turn it on again, and hopefully it doesn't disappear this time. So we should now all have Avantis on our screens, and hopefully Avantis stays on our screens this time. What you can do is set the configuration of your controls at the bottom here. So we've got a few different options. We've got gain, pan, and we have 3 custom options, which can be configured from the setup page. So if I go to control and surface preferences, I can configure what these 3 custom functions of my rotary encoders do. So you can, for instance, have PQ, you can have send. What I'm going to do for function 2 is I'm going to change it to be gate and compressor controls. And what this means now is if I, for instance, go into my compressor here and I change my configuration at the bottom to be gate and compressor controls, these encoders now, instead of controlling those specific channel parameters, so for instance, I think by default it's gain, all of the channel encoders now control the one channel's dynamic controls. So if I move my threshold here, my threshold goes up and down. If I move my gain here, my gain changes. If I now go for one of the emulations, what we've tried to do is keep it as consistent as possible. Sometimes sometimes it's really difficult to decide which control you map to which because they don't all have gain, threshold, etc. They might just have input and output. But if I go for the 1176, for instance, which is a reasonably good example, what we've done is we've tried to map it as sensibly as possible to input and output, and kept attack and release in the same place. And I go back to a channel. If I go back to a channel with a default compressor, you can see attack and release are in a different place, or in the same place and in the same order. And we've tried our best to keep those other controls in as sensible a place as possible. Obviously, when you're dealing with hardware emulations, they don't all have exactly the same controls. So we've just had to make a best guess, if you like, on what the most appropriate place to map each encoder is. But I would say that's the easiest way to get the most consistent experience. Hopefully, that's the question you're asking. Hopefully, that's the question you're asking. Brian says, "Thank you for answering my questions. No problem at all. Any idea on how to approach being able to duck the mix to an ME bands when a talkback from front of house or band MD channel is used?" So there are a few different options. You could put a ducker on every channel, but that would be a bit naff, and use up all your gate sections. Don't know. Gonna have to have a think about that one. We're gonna have to have a think, David, and work out the best place to the best way to approach that, because there are a few different options. Is there an option for the Cell Mix Paffle soft button to include a DCA fader spill? So there's no option for it to specifically include a DCA fader spill, as far as I'm aware. I think the mix DCA spill, the mix key on that is separate to the mix key that would be a DCA spill mix key. I don't know. Let's have a go. Let's see what happens. So if I flick back to dLive Director, I'm going to try my same trick of double putting it on the screen. I hope it doesn't go away. 24 says, right now I have a scene linked to a soft key that has a recoil filter, has all insert B points disabled. Okay, interesting. Oh, I see. Sorry, part of the second question. Future updates include enabling, disabling insert AB points across channels. For instance, if wave crashes in the middle of a show, could this be a macro? Yeah. So at the moment, you can set up scenes using our scene safes. There's a little bit of something you've got to be aware of when using scene safes with inserts, which is the behavior of the return. I will find a link and put it in the chat, because we've got a really good knowledge base article that sort of explains what works, when it doesn't, and how to approach that, because I regularly forget. So I'll go through and I'll go find that link in a few minutes for you. So I opened up dLive because we were going to have a look at how that Cell Mix Paffle behaves if you use DCA spill. So if we go through, if we go and we choose a DCA, so I've chosen DCA1. Let's put some channels into DCA1 and come out of our mix. Go back to the main mix for now. Let's assign some DCA somewhere sensible. So if we go to Surface, Strip Assign, okay, and we'll put 2 DCAs in. And those 2 DCAs. Let's give our channels some names real quick to make this really easy. So we'll have the smallest drum kit in the entire world. We'll have kick, we'll have snare, we'll have an overhead, and then maybe we'll have a guitar, a bass, and a vocal. Let's have 2 vocals. So we have some channels to play with. And then we can put some stuff in our DCA. So let's take DCA1. And we're going to say that DCA1 is, for instance, all of our drums. So we can do this a number of ways, but the easiest way in the configuration I've got at the moment is to go to the routing tab. And we can choose our input. We can choose what's assigned to this DCA for the routing tab. So let's go for our drums. And in our other DCA, I'm going to put everything that isn't drums. And those are our 2 DCAs. We then need to enable DCA spill, which is under Surface, Control, DCA options, and I'm going to enable my spill. What this means, and obviously I've done so few channels in this configuration for this example, you would never use DCA spill for 7 channels, is if I press mix on DCA1, I get my drums. And if I press mix on DCA2, I get everything else. Obviously, this is fantastically helpful if you're trying to mix lots and lots of channels. Or if you're not mixing lots of channels and you're like me, you just you just want to organize everything really easily. So if we now press soft key 1, we can see, oh, there we go. It does work. So if we press soft key 1, we get mix on that DCA, but it will also enable anything else in here. So we've got our spill active. Oh, no, we've got our, we're pathing that DCA and we are pressing mix on that DCA. You've also got the option if you wanted to select it. I probably wouldn't unless you're only using it to configure your routing options or indeed load a scene. So hopefully that helps. Obviously, if you just want to do DCA spill from a soft key, you don't have to use cell mix baffle. You can just use a normal mix soft key. So hopefully that helps. Let's see, what else have we got going on? So I'm only going to be talking about dLive and Avantis really in these sessions. My colleague Keith does do some wonderful SQ and Q sessions. He is the SQQ expert. I do not know how many channels the SQ Auto Mix can have. But if you want to check it out, if you have a look on our website, if you go to alan-heath.com, go on products and go on SQ, I'm fairly confident the answer will be in there somewhere. Though says, thanks. I'll try using the pots under the screens, but I was referring to when you put the threshold attack release on the pots to the right of the channel. I see. Fair enough. I think that's something we need to have a little look into. Keith is in the chat. He just says all of them. So SQ can mix all the channels all the time. That's direct from Keith himself, so it must be true. Thank you, Keith, for jumping in. Appreciate it. Cool. If there are any other questions, please do pop them in the chat. Otherwise, I think we will think about bringing this stream to an end. I always try and keep them under an hour because no one needs to hear me talk for an hour. It's incredibly boring. On that note, just going to have some water real quick. We do have lots of these sessions going on. We have SQ sessions, Q sessions. We even now have some DJ sessions from my colleague Al, who has taken to streaming very, very well. So if you are into your zone products and want to come and have a chat to us about all things DJ, keep an eye on our Facebook and YouTube, and you will find my colleague Al doing all things zone. Henning says, I'm thinking more like select a cell mix, baffle, stereo mix, and then get the channels that the talent on stage uses the most via DCA spill. Oh, that does, yeah, I do get it. That makes loads of sense. Yeah, fair enough. Cool. Well, unless anyone has any other burning questions, I will probably consider bringing this stream to an end. But it's been lovely to talk to you all. I'll be doing another one in sort of 4 weeks-ish time. And I'll be potentially joined by a guest and have someone more interesting to talk at you than just hearing me. Thank you ever so much for joining. Always appreciate your time and always appreciate your kind questions and interest. We do our best to answer as many of them as possible, as truthfully as possible. If I have told anybody that I'll get back to them after the stream, please contact us via the support system. It's the best way of speaking to us. Because if we need to put any member of R&D in the chat, that's the easiest way for us to get the answers you need as fast as you need them. If you're interested in buying anything, or if you're interested in getting demos or anything like that, the best thing to do is to speak to your local distribution partner in whatever territory you happen to live in, and you can find out who that is and how to contact them by going to alan-heath.com/where-to-buy, and there is also a where to buy button in the top right of our website that will tell you who it is in each territory, in each country, that is in charge of looking after all things Alan and Heath. And they're the best people to get into contact with, things like training, if you're interested in sales and pricing, that kind of thing. Or indeed, if English isn't your first language and you would prefer to have these conversations in another language, they are the best people to talk to you too. Okay, with that, I shall leave you to it. Thank you ever so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Someone has posted the where to buy link on the Facebook stream. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and we'll catch you very, very soon. Goodbye now.